inaugural address of President Dwight D. Eisenhower.
My fellow citizens, the world and we have passed the midway point of a century of continuing challenge. For our own country, it has been a time of recurring trial. Seeking to secure peace in the world, we have had to fight our way through the forests of the Argonne, to the shores of Iwo Jima, and to the cold mountains of Korea. We find ourselves groping to know the full sense and meaning of these times. How far have we come in man's long pilgrimage from darkness toward the light? Are we nearing the light, a day of freedom and of peace for all mankind? Or are the shadows of another night closing in upon us?
After World War II, when he came home, life was going to be nice and quiet and good. But instead, we found that we were involved in a Cold War. It was a Cold War against a very determined potential enemy, the Soviet Union. We had a new weapons system that had never been really part of the equation before, nuclear weapons. As Eisenhower said, we're opening the world to a new form of danger that is unprecedented. The war will be this horrible, horrible thermonuclear war. We'll be throwing these things at each other from long distances, killing millions of people.
Eisenhower's highest priority as president becomes keeping the world at peace. He knew there could be no winners of the nuclear war. It would be an apocalypse for the entire world. Eisenhower believes that the Cold War will be a protracted, long-term effort. He works to limit defense spending to sustain and improve the American economy over the long haul. He continues to implement the policy of containing the spread of the Soviet Union while aggressively seeking agreements to lower the risk of nuclear war by miscalculation or accident. The death of Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin on March 5, 1953, presents Eisenhower with an opportunity to reach out to the new Soviet leadership with an appeal for peace. Speaking with the eloquence of a soldier who has seen the horror, stupidity, and cost of war, he now sees his mission as waging peace.
In this spring of 1953, the free world weighs one question above all others: the chances for a just peace for all people. What can the world, or any nation in it, hope for if no turning is found on this dread road? The worst is atomic war. The best would be this: a life of perpetual fear and tension, a burden of arms draining the wealth and labor of all people. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. We pay for a single fighter plane with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people. This is, I repeat, the best way of life to be found on the road the world has been taking. We are ready, in short, to dedicate our strength to serving the needs rather than the fears of the world.
He was remarkable in his ability to understand alliances and to understand that not every challenge requires a military solution. And he also had a sense that America should not get involved in conflicts that are not essential to our vital interest, our national interest. And Korea was one such war. I will go to Korea. And he did, and succeeded in bringing it to a conclusion.
We have won an armistice on a single battleground, not peace in the world. We may not now relax our guard nor cease our quest. We shall fervently strive to ensure that this armistice will, in fact, bring free peoples one step nearer to their goal of a world at peace.
President Eisenhower understood that simply we had the better system. And if we just stuck with our system, and if we continued to improve our system, creating wealth for our people, building highways, building schools, solving some of the social problems that existed, that ultimately we would prevail. At the same time that he was building up our military force, he was also reaching out to the Soviet Union. Atoms for Peace.
The United States pledges before you, and therefore before the world, its determination to help solve the fearful atomic dilemma, to devote its entire heart and mind to find the way by which the miraculous inventiveness of man shall not be dedicated to his death, but consecrated to his life. Thank you.
He sort of knew that there was a flaw, a fault in the basic Soviet system and in communism that would eventually bring it down.
From the White House in the office of the President of the United States, we present an address by Dwight D. Eisenhower. This is the farewell address for President Eisenhower, whose 8 years as chief executive come to an end at noon Friday.
This evening, I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
President Eisenhower understood his moment. It's a look back, a retrospective on everything that he had done since graduating from West Point in 1915. And looking back, he's drawing lessons from his 45 years in public life. And he's saying, we made more progress and achieved more growth than any 10 centuries combined. And yet we had these great tragedies and these great derailments. The lesson is that we cannot afford to withdraw from public life. We must remain involved, and we must stay expert in the one thing we're all expert in, and that is how we choose to govern ourselves. His entire presidency aimed towards a point where we would all say, peace has come, and now we can demobilize the army, we can all stand down, we don't have to worry about threats. That's what was supposed to happen in 1960 and didn't, because the various sides were not ready for that, especially the Russians. The Russians remembered the German invasion, and they did not trust anybody. They ventured a relationship with the United States, but then they drew back in 1960. And when they drew back, Dwight Eisenhower realized that his concept of ending this conflict during his presidency had not been realized. And that meant that all of the military power that we assembled to preserve the peace and to keep the Russians from acting on their aggressions would have to be kept into place. I think he's concerned that when you have organizations with as much responsibility and the resources that the American defense establishment had in 1960, that unless that establishment was constantly watched, unless they were constantly asked to justify themselves, that they were capable of shaping the decisions that a free people must make.
Together we must learn how to compose differences, not with arms, but with intellect and decent purpose. Because this need is so sharp and apparent, I confess that I lay down my official responsibilities in this field with a definite sense of disappointment. As one who has witnessed the horror and the lingering sadness of war, As one who knows that another war could utterly destroy this civilization, which has been so slowly and painfully built over thousands of years, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight. Happily, I can say that war has been avoided. Steady progress toward our ultimate goal has been made, but so much remains to be done to help the world advance along that road. So in this, my last good night to you as your president, I thank you for the many opportunities you have given me for public service in war and in peace. I trust in that service you find some things worthy. You and I, my fellow citizens, need to be strong in our faith that all nations under God will reach the goal of peace with justice. May we be ever unswerving in devotion to principle, confident but humble with power, diligent in pursuit of the nation's great goals. Now, on Friday noon, I am to become a private citizen. I am proud to do so. I look forward to it. Thank you, and good night.
Dwight Eisenhower bought us time. He did not solve the problem. He bought us time. But the struggle is not over. We're going to be waging peace for some time to come.
Eisenhower's national security legacy as president concludes with 7.5 years of peace. He actively promotes arms control and believes that by avoiding war and strengthening our economy, we would ultimately win the Cold War struggle against the Soviet Union. History would prove him right. His basic policies would be sustained for 3 decades until the collapse of the Soviet Union.